The day I walked barefoot into the city, I made the news. Mercer family's adopted daughter, after being kidnapped for months, came back in tattered clothes and with feet covered in bruises. She looked miserable, just like a dog. I watched as the media's flashlights were pointed at me, capturing every moment. Ding! Wisnovel reminds you to click the subscribe button in the bottom right corner to read the complete novel. But my heart had long turned into still water, unable to be stirred. The old Erica Hector was dead. That glamorous, innocent, and lively Erica Hector was dead. It was the kidnappers, and also Hubert Mercer, who destroyed her. Soon, a group of bodyguards in black suits cleared a path through the crowded people. The leader was called Jonah Kenyon. I knew him. During the 7 years I was entangled with Hubert, he was the one who always escorted me out of Hubert's office and private apartment. He said escort, but it was more like dragging. Because I clung to him desperately, and Hubert was extremely annoyed. Miss Hector, Mr. Mercer is waiting for you in the car, please come with me. When Jonah Kenyon's gaze fell on me, he was momentarily surprised. Clearly, he did not expect me to look like this. I nodded and took a step forward with my injured foot, leaving behind bloody footprints on the road. My pain receptors were long numb. Compared to my escape, this short journey was nothing. Jonah Kenyon walked behind me and couldn't help but call out, "Miss Hector." I didn't answer him. Was he feeling sorry for me? Actually, he should be grateful. After this lesson, I will never cling to Hubert Mercer again. I will not give him any more trouble at work. After getting in the car, I saw Hubert sitting in the seat with his eyes closed, resting. His fine black hair was meticulously groomed, his delicate features were perfect and impeccable. Yes, during my absence, he must have felt an unprecedented tranquility and ease. He looked perfectly fine. Hearing some noise, Hubert slowly opened his eyes. The moment he saw me, he almost didn't recognize me. "Erica?" I obediently nodded. Yes, I've learned my lesson. Before, I didn't care about being raised as a daughter of the Mercer family. I considered myself as their own daughter, proud and arrogant. But now, after being kidnapped, I realized that my fate is in the hands of the Mercer family. As long as Hubert doesn't pay for ransom, I am just a worthless life. He frowned, looking displeased. How did you let yourself become like this? Like this? What kind of state? A madwoman? A beggar? I have been running away for dozens of kilometers, sleepless day and night. In addition to the kidnappers, I also have to be wary of the wild beasts in the outskirts and mountains. When I was thirsty, I drank rainwater. When I was hungry, I rummaged through garbage dumps by the highway. I think anyone would go crazy in this situation. I know that he blamed me for appearing like this in the media. It will cause trouble for his company, or more precisely, the Mercer Group. I'm sorry. Sorry for dirtying Hubert's eyes. Upon hearing my response, Hubert paused for a moment, then a smile appeared at the corner of his lips. She was right, you've indeed learned your lesson. I couldn't understand what Hubert was saying. When the car door closed and the car started, Hubert suddenly reached out his long arm towards me. Instinctively, I shrank into the corner. But he stopped abruptly and spoke with a disgusted tone. "Erica Hector, you smell bad." Perhaps due to the closed space in the car, the unpleasant smell on my body was finally noticed by Hubert. It was a mixture of blood and sweat, rolling in the mud, fermenting after scraping through garbage dumps. Upon hearing his words, I subconsciously moved away from the seat. As a result, the car became unstable, and I ended up kneeling in the aisle. "I'm sorry, I won't dirty the seat, I just want to kneel here. It hurts, on my knees, and also from the blood holes pierced by the kidnappers with thin steel needles. They blame me because I am insignificant to Hubert Mercer. Since they didn't receive the ransom, they thought they had done a useless job, they took it out on me. I couldn't stand up, so I simply knelt in that narrow space." Hubert instantly became furious. "What are you doing? Get back to your seat." He commanded me, but he didn't want to touch me because I was dirty. I could only obey and struggled to sit back, using all my strength to support my body. The pain, coupled with the low blood sugar I've had these days, made tears stream down uncontrollably. Hubert has always ignored my tears, finding them annoying. But this time, he unexpectedly threw the handkerchief he had wiped his hands with onto me. I clenched the clean and white handkerchief. In the past, I would have been overjoyed. But now, that handkerchief only signifies my dirtiness and brokenness. Jonah Kenyon glanced at me through the rearview mirror. I lowered my head. Perhaps he had never seen me so embarrassed and ridiculous before. The car drove back to the Mercer residence, and I was taken to the bathroom by maid to freshen up. I refused the help of the maids. And I only allowed them to pick out a long dress from my old wardrobe that went past my ankles. They searched for a while. Finally, in the corner of various fashion choices, they pulled out a set of modest long-sleeved dress, similar to a student's uniform. No one defined how a student should dress. But as I looked at myself in the mirror, I did indeed look more like a student than before with my previous flashy style. Before being kidnapped, I received an acceptance letter from a top design college abroad. And now, it has been 3 months since the registration deadline. Thank you. The maids were shocked, not expecting the young miss to thank them. But after this experience, I am well aware that fundamentally, I am no different from them. They are maids employed by the Mercer family. And I am the daughter employed by the Mercer family. I pushed open the door and saw Hubert waiting for me at the staircase. He leaned against the railing, lazily assessing me from head to toe, then sneered. "Erica, what trick are you playing? Dressing like this? Is it tacky?" Hubert thought this was another childish act of mine to get his attention. But I just wanted to cover up the bruises on my body. I followed behind Hubert and arrived at the dining room. The dining room was silent until Hubert Mercer gestured for me to come forward. And only then did I see the worried expressions on the faces of Mr. Mercer and Mrs. Mercer sitting at the dining table. Mrs. Mercer, Hubert's mother, almost rushed over when she saw me. She stumbled, and a woman next to her kindly supported her. "Mrs. Mercer, don't worry. Miss Erica came back unharmed, right? Miss Erica, Mrs. Mercer has been worried sick about you." I recognized this woman. She was Hubert's secretary. Dana Silver had naturally long black hair, wearing the simplest high-necked sweater and jeans. But she had a beautiful rose gold necklace hanging on her neck. I came back unharmed, and in comparison, Mercer mother's hair turned white with worry. As soon as she spoke, I went from being a victim to an unfilial daughter of the Mercer family. Mrs. Mercer pulled me into a hug, and the woman next to her comforted her, but I couldn't cry. I looked at Hubert, and his gaze seemed to say that I was heartless. Finally, Mr. Mercer solemnly interrupted. "Don't hold on to Erica anymore, let her come and eat." Mrs. Mercer wiped away her tears. "Yes, it's my fault. Erica has suffered during this time and probably hasn't eaten properly. Come, I made your favorite fish soup." Mrs. Mercer pulled me to sit between Mr. Mercer and her. Hubert sat across from me, and Dana sat next to him. How much they resembled a family. I looked at the food in the bowl, which was delicious and appetizing. I almost forgot what normal food looked like. I really wanted to put down my chopsticks and use my hands to grab and eat. The closer I got to the city, the stricter the sanitation management became. Gradually, I couldn't find any garbage piles, which meant there was no food. So I had been hungry for almost 3 days, only able to eat leaves to fill my hunger. Under the gaze of everyone, I restrained myself and picked up the bowl with my chopsticks, scooping rice into my mouth. Even so, I could still see Dana's mocking eyes. She delicately ate with her chopsticks, showcasing her elegance. When Hubert saw this scene, he naturally became even more disgusted with me. But under the signal of his mother, he had no choice but to personally pick up a piece of sweet and sour pork and put it on my plate. I thought that even if it was the most difficult to swallow watery porridge and steamed bread from before, I could still wolf it down now. But when I looked at the tempting sweet and sour pork and thought that it was picked up by Hubert himself, I felt a wave of nausea in my stomach. "Erica, try it. Hubert knows that you like the sweet and sour flavor, so he specially asked Chef to add an extra dish." Nonsense, Hubert doesn't know anything about what I like. On the contrary, I know his preferences very well. Such as gold, he likes rose gold the most. Seeing that my hand hesitated before picking up the chopsticks, Hubert's father asked with concern. "What's wrong, Erica? Did you quarrel with Hubert on the way back?" "Don't worry, after we finish eating, I'll deal with him." "Dad!" Hubert called out, perhaps feeling that this would make him lose face in front of Dana. I didn't say anything and just shook my head. I overcame the physical disgust and used the chopsticks to put the sweet and sour pork into my mouth. But the moment I swallowed, I vomited it out. Hubert looked shocked. And I immediately stood up from the chair and hid in the corner, holding my head. "I'm sorry about it. I will eat it, please don't hit me." Everyone was shocked, and Mrs. Mercer's tears flowed again. She immediately came over and hugged me. "Did those people abuse you, Erica? Tell me, did they?" Mr. Mercer, with Hubert by his side, also walked over. Mr. Mercer looked reluctant, his eyes full of pity as he looked at me. But Hubert frowned and didn't say a word. And his face was so dark that it was unbelievable. "What does this mean? Didn't the kidnappers threaten the Mercer family, saying that if they didn't pay the ransom, they would let their adopted daughter experience being bullied? Why are they now asking me if I have been abused? In fact, giving me a steamed bun and a bowl of spoiled rice wouldn't be considered abuse. After all, everything I ate afterwards was like dirty water. I'm just too scared of the feeling that my fate is in Hubert's hands. The kidnappers negotiated with him personally, but he chose to abandon me. He hates me so much. I think this feeling of physical disgust is exactly because of that." After dinner, I was called to Mr. Mercer's study. Hubert's father, Mr. Mercer, who used to be decisive in the business world, patiently asked me, "Erica, you've liked Hubert since you were young. Do you still like him now?" I quickly shook my head, exerting a lot of effort, and my face started to hurt. I liked Hubert for 7 years, humbled myself for 7 years, and suffered for 7 years, but I never learned my lesson. So this time, I experienced revenge and torment like hell. I dare not like Hubert anymore. After hearing my answer, Mr. Mercer pondered for a moment and said regretfully, "Sorry, forget it. Although you can't be the daughter-in-law of the Mercer family, you will always be a daughter of the Mercer family. Erica, you're so good, so beautiful. It's that boy Hubert's lack of luck." He took out a bank card from the drawer. "This is what your parents left for you. Inside is $4 million. They asked me to keep it and said that when you grow up, I should give it to you as your dowry. $4 million, the same amount as the ransom. During the days of being kidnapped, I had resented my parents. I resented why they didn't take me away with them and let me suffer like this for no reason. It turns out that they had already left behind a guarantee that would allow me to live well. They loved me so much. I put my thumb in my mouth and bit it to prevent myself from crying out loud. Thank you, Uncle Mercer. When I left the study, it was already 8 o'clock in the evening. I walked towards my own room but met Hubert on the way. He saw my intention and spoke to me in an unexpectedly gentle tone. Tonight, Dana will stay in your room. You can go stay in the guest room next to mine. So it was for Dana. I nodded and started walking in the opposite direction. When I first moved into the Mercer house, Hubert disliked me. So he moved to the room farthest from me, one in the east and one in the west. But my room was decorated by the top luxury designer hired by Mr. Mercer. And the guest room couldn't compare with my room. But after all, it was something of the Mercer family, so if Hubert wanted me to give it up, I would. After taking a few steps, Hubert called me back. Erica, why are you being so obedient now? I turned around and saw his expression, which carried a hint of ridicule and worry. I'm sorry. I hesitated and spoke. Besides constantly apologizing, I had no idea what to say to Hubert. This is the 3rd time you've apologized to me today. You're very strange. Hubert walked over, bent down, and reached out to touch my forehead. I quickly recoiled as if I had been electrocuted. When I held onto the railing of the corridor, my legs weakened, and I could hardly stand. Hubert looked at me as if I were crazy, and he became impatient again. I suppressed the trembling in my voice and said, I will move out tomorrow. I've already told Uncle Mercer. I thought that when Hubert heard this news, he would feel relieved and let me go. But unexpectedly, he became angry. Move out? Why? I just let Dana stay in your room for a while. She's a guest. What's wrong with you letting her stay? I hurriedly shook my head. No, it's not like that. Hubert walked towards me with a gloomy face, grabbed my wrist, and pulled me towards the room at the far east. Come with me, I have something to tell you. A surge of fear overwhelmed my brain. I took out the bank card that Uncle Mercer had just given me in the room, with a trembling voice. I'm sorry, I have money, please don't hit me. I have money, please don't hit me. Mercer turned around in astonishment. I was already sitting paralyzed on the ground, my wrist still held high in his hand. Erica, what are you saying? By now, my lips were turning purple from biting them. As I looked at Mercer's face, which was gradually growing larger, I gradually recalled the words the kidnappers had insulted me with. You are just a dog of the Mercer family, yet you dare to cling to your master. Hubert, no, Mr. Mercer, I won't cling to you anymore. I won't dare anymore. Hubert finally realized that there was something wrong with my mental state. His movements became much gentler. He hugged my waist and lifted me up from the ground. The feeling of weightlessness made me instinctively hold onto Hubert's neck. And his serious expression finally softened a bit. Erica, it's not that I don't want you to cling to me, it's just… Before he could finish his sentence, the door of the corridor suddenly opened with a click. Dana poked her head out of my room, where the lights were bright. She covered her mouth, looking somewhat surprised. Mr. Mercer, Miss Hector. Hubert frowned. I gave you the room, what else do you need? Dana answered with a hint of grievance. There's a video conference from the American branch that you need to attend in person. Hubert glanced at me in his arms, and reluctantly let me down. My body stiffened, unable to say a word. You go wait for me in my room. After Hubert left these words, he walked towards Dana. Then the two of them entered the room and closed the door. The bright light disappeared from the corridor. And I was left feeling like I had survived a disaster, with cold sweat soaking through the clothes on my back. Hubert wouldn't come back anymore, because I knew Dana's methods. Countless times, on my birthday, at my graduation ceremony, he was always called away by Dana like this. Perhaps he really wanted to leave, and he really didn't want to come back. And I also had to leave as soon as possible, to a place where I couldn't see Hubert. I was afraid that if I had any more contact with Hubert, I would mentally collapse and go crazy. Sitting on the bed in the guest room until 3 o'clock in the morning, there was no sound coming from the next room where Hubert was staying. During this time, I used the new phone that Hubert's mother bought for me to log into a rental app. I found an apartment that was being rented out with good security. Just as the sky was starting to brighten, it was quiet inside the Mercer family's residence. I picked up my shoes and walked out barefoot. When I got outside, I suddenly saw someone leaning against Hubert's car, playing with his phone. I was shocked and afraid that the person might be Hubert Mercer. The person also heard the noise and looked towards me. Only then did I realize that it was Jonah Kenyon. I pretended nothing had happened and walked past him to the side of the road, ready to hail a taxi. But he followed me. Miss Erica, does Mr. Mercer know about you? Can you not tell Hubert Mercer? I held back my excitement. I was so close, just a little bit more, and I could escape. Why did I have to run into him? Jonah was a bit puzzled. Mr. Mercer would worry. I shook my head hard, trying to control my emotions, and started taking off my clothes. Jonah hurriedly stepped back and turned his head, his ears turning red. Miss Erica, what are you doing? I didn't care. If I could survive, what did shame matter? That kind of thing had long been worn away by Hubert. He won't worry about me. These scars were left on me by those kidnappers under his orders. At this moment, Jonah looked at me. Underneath my coat was a white sleeveless vest, clearly showing the purple whip marks, the bruises, and several scab scars on my arms. He couldn't believe it. These shocking scars exceeded his understanding. Taking advantage of his stunned state, I quickly put my clothes back on and pleaded. "Jonah, please, let me go, or I will die." This was the first time I called him by his name. Before, I always referred to him as Hubert's dog. Just like those kidnappers referred to me.